En 2024, Télil va célébrer 30 ans comme organisation télécommunautaire non lucrative. Elle a ouvert les portes en 1994 et sert le comté de Richmond et les alentours avec des programmations locaux, soit de la musique, des nouvelles, des entrevues avec des personnages locaux, le télébingo ou bien les informations sur les événements du jour. Elle emploie 3 personnes à plein temps, 2 personnes de mi-temps et avec l'aide du programme IGL ou l'Initiative des journalistes locaux de Cactus, elle a aussi 2 journalistes, un anglophone et une francophone qui travaillent pour donner la voix à nos citoyens et de partager des reportages qui ont un impact sur nos communautés. À travers du Canada, il ne reste que moins de 30 stations de télévision communautaires et il n'y a qu'une seule ici à la Nouvelle-Écosse, celle de Télil. En plus, Télil est une des seules stations qui a sa propre bâtisse. Les autres se trouvent dans des écoles, dans des bibliothèques, dans des centres communautaires, etc. Au début, Télil, comme toutes les autres stations communautaires, était diffusée sur un canal de câble communautaire, ce qui a été réglé par le Conseil de la radiodiffusion et les télécommunications canadiennes, ou le CRTC. Le CRTC est un tribunal quasi-judicial qui fonctionne sans bien de dépendance avec le gouvernement. C'est cette organisation qui forme les règlements pour la diffusion de tous les médias au Canada. Les formats médiatiques incluent maintenant tous les formats et plateformes numériques qui se trouvent sur l'Internet, ainsi que les services satellites et de streaming qu'on trouve sur nos télés. Télil, comme d'autres télévisions communautaires, a dû s'adapter et développer de nouvelles stratégies pour rester viable et pour faire certaine que sa programmation et les voix des citoyens continuent d'être accessibles. Cette année, il y a eu un grand changement au niveau fédéral qui pourrait encore avoir un impact ici à Télil. 2 projets de loi ont été mis en loi cette année pour adresser les anciennes lois dépassées de la radiodiffusion au Canada. Ceci veut dire que le CRTC doit maintenant moderniser leur cadre réglementaire pour la radiodiffusion. Le CRTC a commencé d'avoir des audiences publiques pour entendre des parties concernées qui seront impactées par les 2 nouvelles lois pour leur guider avec la formation des nouveaux règlements. Un de ces joueurs est Cactus, ou l'Association canadienne des usagers et stations de la télévision communautaire. Pendant l'audience publique du 28 novembre, la directrice exécutive de Cactus, Catherine Edwards, a partagé qu'elle avait peur que les petites organisations communautaires seront perdues et oubliées parmi les négociations entre les grands joueurs. Elle propose que le CRTC reconnaisse les entreprises de radiodiffusion à but non lucratif comme étant éligibles pour les négociations avec les plateformes numériques. En plus, elle propose un fonds pour les médias d'accès communautaire. Aussi à la table pendant les audiences publiques à Gatineau, Québec, étaient 2 membres de CHCOTV au Nouveau-Brunswick. CHCOTV, comme Télil, est une station de télévision non lucrative communautaire qui sert le sud-ouest du Nouveau-Brunswick. Vicky Hogarth, la coordinatrice de nouvelles, et Patrick Watt, le gestionnaire de station, ont partagé avec le CRTC l'importance des stations communautaires et l'impact de la diffusion des programmes et informations pertinentes à leur région locale. Ils m'en ont parlé plus dans l'entrevue qui suit.
So I'd like to welcome Vicky Hogarth, News Director of CHCOTV, and Patrick Watt, Station Manager of CHCOTV. Thank you for joining us today at Télil. What did it mean to you guys as a local organization to be at the table?
Well, I think it was, to start with, we thought about, well, should we do this by Zoom? And we thought, well, it'd be more impactful to make the trip to Ottawa, tell our story about who we are in person so they can feel that is palpable in the room, what it means to be a nonprofit, independent community station in a part of Canada that, let's be frank, isn't Ontario or Quebec, is an underserved news desert, and to really represent the few community television stations that are truly independent that are left in Canada. So while it would have been easier to do it virtually, we thought it's really worth the trip, because hopefully that will make more of an impact on the CRTC when they make their decisions about where this funding will go when they ultimately come to that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it is a bit of a trek for you guys. You're in southwestern Nouveau-Brunswick.
That's right.
How long a drive is that for you guys to go to Gatineau?
Well, if we drove, we flew this time. Because if we drive,
it's been driven.
Probably about 11 hours or so if you go the Canadian way. Oh, no, I think 13 if you go the Canadian way, 11 if you cut through Maine. Yeah. So we decided there is a direct flight from Porter from Fredericton. So we decided to fly and then go visit our MP at Parliament while we were there as well, do as much as we could that made it a worthwhile business trip aside from just presenting at the CRTC. It was my first time speaking at a hearing, so it was a little nerve-wracking at first, but once you get going, you really feel why it's important to take the time to do these things, because there are so few of us that are left in Canada, and to have that opportunity to not just speak for CHCO, but to be that voice for places as special like Tulil as well, that are doing this tremendous contribution to the communities that they serve. I think a place like Tulil and a place like CHCO can be models for the rest of Canada when we look at the state of journalism right now. I'm sure that you've experienced this in your part of the world. I know that, I've been in journalism for over 20 years, and so many of the friends that I started out with, and I did say this at the hearing, who are great, incredible journalists 20 years ago, I'd say now the majority of the people that I came up with in the industry are not working in journalism anymore. And that is the sad reality of Canada. And I'm sure it's similar in other countries as well, including the US. But if we could find more places that could model themselves after Tulil and CHCO to better serve these news deserts, and honestly, not just news deserts, I think in big cities, they have a lack of local news at times as well. So I thought it was really important to represent us there, and also not just represent funding coming to us, but maybe the possibility of funding for other stations to emerge that could serve a similar purpose in places where they don't have local news anymore. And sadly, that is a lot of places.
So what's the challenge then? Sorry, Patrick, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no. This phase of the hearing is more towards how to level the playing field with Netflix and Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, those U.S. services that are directly basically offering programming to subscribers. So in a sense, everybody likes to say they don't watch TV anymore, but everybody is still watching TV to a certain extent. And I guess to make it really simple, you got to look at the internet as being kind of the gateway of to get at all these other subscription services. So if you considered that made the comparison that your internet service is basic cable, and that gives you a bunch of free stuff, and then if you sign up even to premium services like YouTube Plus or whatever they call that, and then all these other Disney channels and whatnot, those are your pay TV channels or your video on demand channels. So your premium subscriptions. So essentially nothing's really changed as far as how we watch TV. You're still subscribing to something and watching content. Right. And the model of that for Canadian providers is that they're levied 5% of the subscription fees are levied towards Canadian content. So, and part of that goes to news, and part of that goes to community television, and you know, and the money trickles back into a public service for Canadians. I mean, these big corporations are commercially using the public right of way. They use our telephone poles to string their cables on and get them into and get the services into our homes. They use the over-the-air radio waves to get cell phone data onto our smartphones so that we can watch video there. All this stuff has traditionally been taxed because it belongs to the public, and therefore, if you're going to use it commercially, you have to provide a public service, which usually translates to local TV or local content and local news.
Right.
So when Disney Plus starts selling their services direct to Canadians, and they're doing it on the backs of infrastructure that typically provides a public service, but yet they're in the United States and they're really not providing a public service to us. How do we catch up with making sure that that is done? Because otherwise there's a burden on Canadian providers to do a public service, but yet an international provider gets to use all the infrastructure that they built and then not have to do the public service side. So essentially C11 is there to apply that levy to those services so Canadians benefit. And because Disney's not going to come to Arashat and set up community television and cover your local council, all of this hearing is all about is that they get levied, it produces a fund, and then local TV stations like Telil or CHCO or the other broadcasters for that matter can have their fingers in it too, to have access to the funds to produce programming.
I think if Marshall McLuhan was alive today, he would say exactly that. You are still watching television. The same way we say we watch a film. Well, it's not on film anymore either. It has a new mode of transport to your living room, but it's still the same idea.
Right? We're not rolling videotape or rolling film. You're right.
The technology has changed, but the
technology has changed, but what you're doing is exactly the same. Disney Plus is television, right?
And so the trick for local community TV stations is making sure that they get a piece of that pie. Then
that's right. And that's what we were there to do. And maybe at this level, they were talking a little bit more about news than the infrastructure that it takes to run a television station at a local level like ours. But I guess us being there helped remind them that we do have that, and some community channels do have that role too, and that is to produce news in with their public access content that sometimes may not be considered news, but still the news that we generate at a community level involves the community more, of course, and it's put out more cost effectively. We don't have a lot of the fancy studios and infrastructure that a big city television station typically has to pull together. And of course that means we can put out more news more cost effectively. Right. And that's what that was the message that we were there to tell them.
Right.
And I think too, it's the reason why it's so important to go in person is because when you look at the community television funding, that's not something that we here at CHCO get, or you at Telil. I think that there's a misconception that we must benefit from that when in fact it's been siphoned by the media conglomerates who run their own community stations, oftentimes very far from, for CHCO, they're over 100 kilometers away, the closest Rogers studio, and there isn't a bricks and mortar Bell studio in New Brunswick, yet they still receive all the community television funding, and we don't have any of that. So we survive on local advertising, whatever grants we can come up with, local journalism initiative, and TV bingo. But we know that we've already been cut out of a pie that should rightly be a piece that we take from. So the fear is when something like this comes along that is incredibly significant for our Canadian content, that we could just as easily get cut out of something like this. And we could feel that watching the other presentations, that definitely the argument will be made that as small of a piece that would come towards us, there'll be an argument made that we shouldn't get it. So it was important.
For sure.
Yeah, and Patrick, you were talking at the hearing as well about how it is so difficult for local community TV stations to even find or meet the criteria for the funding that is available. Like you were saying that, you know, you tried as a TV station to apply for different grants and monies to help you run, and you just didn't meet criteria. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, sure. And to back up a little bit, the cable community channel, which I guess is a model that kind of started it all, it kind of broke or got broken when in the 1990s, satellite TV started selling subscriptions directly to Canadians. So much like Disney Plus coming into the playing field, you know, bringing in Disney programming or that their programming direct without having to go through a local broadcaster. Well, here you had a satellite company giving 100 channels to rural Nova Scotia or rural Nouveau-Brunswick. You know, for $50, you could get 100 channels, and that probably at the time looked better than your cable offering that you might have got 30 channels and you were paying as much money. So of course, a lot of people switched from one to the other. So the to combat that, what the cable community channels did is, well, the smaller ones didn't have to provide local programming, or if they did provide local programming, they could twofold keep the full 5% Canadian contribution for community programming if their community channel was small enough, or their town, the service area was small enough, and they could sell advertising on that community channel. Now, fast forward a little bit into the 2000s when the low power community television policy came into effect, and Telil and CHCO both became licensed broadcasters. What they did was they figured out a way to say, look, you guys can do advertising, however, you can't have the local 5%. So, however, so there's a conflict of interest there. You've got a cable TV outlet that its policy says that if you don't provide a community channel to a community, and a community channel, an independent community channel exists, you can pay them the full 5%, kind of if you want to. And it's there in black and white. Should they want to, it's going to be allowed. But if they don't want to, and there's a benefit to them, well, they won't, and they didn't. And instead, what they did is they interconnected the cable system to our town from the bigger city, and then their community channel got piped in. So then they used the excuse that they provided local community programming to St. Andrews from St. John, in our case. And, you know, because nobody said they couldn't do it that way. Right. But so, and then, you know, that kind of redefines, well, what is local? Yes. And you know, is it local in New Brunswick? Is it local to Southern New Brunswick? Or is it, you know, we would have made the argument it was local to that local cable system. But once they're allowed to interconnect, they didn't have to keep that definition the same, right? Yeah. It didn't. So their interconnection of technology didn't match what local was or local programming was, just because they're certainly not going to come here to, you know, they might once in a while.
Though we should mention they have actually emailed some of our local community producers trying to poach shows from us, which have been forwarded to us. So just to show you that really, to me, is the opposite of what community television should be, to fulfill a local mandate in Charlotte County where we are, that they aren't. They've actually attempted to poach our talent, which to me is beyond disturbing. It's not even a point we had the chance to bring up at the CRTC, but if there's another round of hearings.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So what is and I get that whole, like, they're just changing the definitions or of what the zone or what local means so that they can say they're meeting that mandate or whatever, and then they're not paying, right? Paying local TV stations to stay open, to remain viable, right? But what is the value of, like, places like Telil and CHCO? What's the value of keeping those community stations open, knowing that we are in an increasingly digital age, knowing that we are trying to access or make accessible news accessible to a wide variety of ages and digital capacities and diverse interests in Canada. Like, how do we do that now?
I think that we do this here. Maybe the television channel is the centerpiece to what we do here, but we are on TikTok, Facebook when it's not blocked by Meta. Though I am using my personal page to put out news and videos still, because we had a 28,000 following on Facebook. Considering we serve an area of just 25,000 people, that's significant and shows you how engaged we are digitally. Compare that to Rogers TV Nouveau-Brunswick only has 6,700 followers, and Bell TV1 across Canada, which is their community station across Canada, only has 13,000 followers. So little CHCO here digitally was engaging and actively engaging with our videos on Facebook alone, had thousands of views when I was able to share them, every single one, whether it was news, council meetings, and that was just Facebook. Our YouTube channel, in terms of subscriptions, grows every day, and our website, actually, if you go on our website, whatever is on television is on our website playing at that exact moment. So we've had to always be forward thinking, because we've had to deal with the likes of Rogers, who have limited our carriage. We've been really lucky. Same with Tallil, being carried across Canada on Bell Satellite has been helpful for that TV audience. That is still quite a significant audience, because when the Facebook block happened, I was shocked at how many people were still watching on television. I think for me, who is, I like to be the one who kind of deals with the social media for our TV station and engages with our audience online. So I was really happily surprised to see how many people still were watching on television. But because of the challenges we've had dealing with the media conglomerates, which also means they've never given us one channel we can call our own, we're moved around all the time. So we've had to be nimble and forward thinking when making sure we reach our audience. So I think that's why we've always done better than them online too, because we've constantly had to find ways to reach every single person, regardless of what technology they had in their home or where they lived in New Brunswick and what that gave them access to on their TV. So because of that, I think, the nice thing about having a broadcast license too, though, is it shows that you're ethically responsible and you follow a code of media ethics, and people know that when they come to your content. Even if they come to your content online, what they know is you've fact-checked everything and that you are going to be fair. And you can't say the same thing about someone who has just a YouTube channel, which is one of the arguments that I made in the 2.5 minutes we split 5 minutes when we talked to the CRTC, was that I think part of the reason why C11 is important and should go towards funding, especially local news and places like CHCO and Tallil that do that for underserved communities, is that something like YouTube should be responsible. While they say, YouTube's argument for why they shouldn't have to pay into things like this is just that, they have this accessible platform for all Canadians to produce content. Look at all the stars who have come up on YouTube, but they don't acknowledge the amount of disinformation, misinformation that they're responsible too. And the only way to combat that level of misinformation that anyone can put out, especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, is to have legitimate local news available to balance that out. So I know that's a long way to answer a question about, is television still relevant? I think it is for a number of reasons, but at the same time, that is not the only way we've relied on. We're very conscious of the way people consume information, and because of that, on top of the challenges that we face being a tiny television station not attached to a media conglomerate, we've always been hyper aware of new ways to reach people.
Right. And I think that's key. It's not what you're covering that changes. It's how you're distributing it. I think that's important so that it still remains viable. That's great. I'm wondering too, what you're hoping for, like in your dream of dreams, what would you hope the CRTC would provide?
Well, we hope that they provide a community television fund to help the operation basic operations of setting up a community channel, and the basic staff. It probably be linked to the amount of the population that station's going to serve, and of course, if that community television station is in a more of a news desert, there may not be a local radio station and a local newspaper in that town. Who knows what the formula could be, but they'll probably look at things like that. But most importantly, if that community station is to provide news and balanced news that's produced with the community, but still keeping with codes and industry standards that show a balanced approach, that we have access to the news fund that the metropolitan television stations all would have access to. Mm-hmm. For sure, that's what I think is the basic ask.
And what would that allow you to do then as a station? Like financially, what would that allow you to do?
Oh, that'll just allow us to do more local news and programming. Running a TV station off TV bingo, I don't know that it's a great approach. It's done in a lot of communities, but it shouldn't be the main source. I mean, should that one operation fail or decline in popularity, I mean, you're going to lose your income. Mm-hmm. It's tricky when you don't have the base funding, because you could spend just as much time producing advertising and delivering bingo cards as you can, produce local programming. And and even the broadcasters were complaining about their the paperwork involved. They've got staff, obviously, and they should, and they should be accountable for the news that they produce, but they have to go minute by minute through their newscasts and all their local programming to what is civic and what counts as news and what's just not, I guess, like fluff or advertising. And then there's that costs money. You got to have people to do that. So and some stations have to look after their lights, and their heat and their
we have our own building, so
that's right.
That's for maintaining. Like the overhead is significant, right?
So part of the pitch was at this hearing too, within our collective pitch was to show that libraries could become involved in communities where that station doesn't necessarily have its own facility, or the municipality doesn't have a full. We're in a civic center that houses other recreational activities. There's a theater here, so that's a bonus for us that we get to use a theater from time to time. So we have a stage and an audience we could bring in for programs. But in a community that might just have a library, that was pitched as an option for a media center, basically. I mean, they're looked as media centers already. As internet became a thing, from books to the internet, let's put computers in libraries. Well, some of them have cameras that you can loan out. Well, why don't you build a studio and staff it so that you can provide more education and training and programming?
2 of our 3 staffers, so Florence and myself, are both currently local journalism initiative journalists, which has been a life-changing program for our station. It's allowed us to expand our council coverage to 2 more communities, which is huge, and increase our local news and local programming. And while that program is exceptional, there's no guarantee that it will last forever. So I think that you look at something that's through Cactus, administered through Cactus, and sponsored by the federal government. There's no guarantee that will last forever. And having television, community television, added into the local journalism initiative, it was originally intended for newspapers. So we hope that program continues because of how we actually seen it change our life here at CHCO. Before that, I could only work here part-time, and now I'm full-time. But if that does end up drying up at some point, we've got to figure out what are our options to go forward to not only keep the 3 staffers we currently have, but hopefully expand and add more. And I think this at Will as well. When you're a nonprofit, there's no executive who's going to get a big bonus if something like Bill C-11 ends up benefiting our station. And we'll continue to do that programming on a hyper local level. All that means is that we'll be able to do more of it. I know when I was listening to Bell's presentation, their first example of what they do well, and I'm not saying it isn't entertaining, was the Amazing Race Canada. And yeah, that is pure entertainment. And they said, oh, this is Canadian content that only Canadians will watch, and it's our best watched show. But if you ask me, that's not adding to what's missing in the Canadian media landscape right now. We can talk about this endlessly about the crisis in local news, but as fun as our Amazing Race Canada is, or any Canadian version of an American reality show, to me, in a lot of ways, that is exactly that. It's the Canadian version of an American reality show that's not adding to what's missing right now. Yeah. And we need to really, when we consider C11, think about the crisis in media, and on top of that, the misinformation age that we're living in with the rise of artificial intelligence and so many online platforms, and think about how we could use this wisely. And I really hope that's what the CRTC does when they make these decisions, is think really consciously about the future of not just Canada, but information in general.
Mm-hmm. And meeting that mandate of hearing those local voices and engaging citizenship and like being responsible and active in our communities and all of that, which is something that we as Canadians value, right? That we have a voice, that we can participate freely in a democratic system and all of that, and part of that is being heard. And I'm not sure that local voices are being heard on Amazing Race Canada, as entertaining as it is. So I thank you so much for sharing your views and your thoughts today on community television and its value, and hopefully getting the funding so that we can remain a viable source of information for and reliable source of information for local people across Canada. And I wish you all the best, and hope that we can continue to work together.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And we love watching what's happening over on Cape Breton, watching Talil on Bell Satellite here. It's always a pleasure to check in with your community. So we appreciate so much what you do for your part of the world.
Thanks. And we're watching you too. So
thank you.
Yes. Have a great day.